On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Tally. And Tally was in a relationship with a triangulating physical abuser. It's a story of future faking, enabling families, intimidation, jealousy, needs reframed as demands, and the religious image. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Tally. How are you?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And if you want to be a guest like Tally is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button, fill out the form, and we will go from there. We also have a support group at our website where we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We also have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you, all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And we also have a newsletter at narcissistapocalypse.com, and you get a free workbook for every new survivor story that comes out. So join our newsletter today. And we do have a content warning for this episode, as we do graphically discuss physical abuse throughout this episode, including a description of strangulation. So that is our content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Tally's story. And Tally was in a relationship with a physical abuser who promised to stop. He was constantly promising to stop. And when that was going on, this person was constantly resetting the cycles every time that promise happened. And in between those incidents, Tally dealt with jealousy, control, belittling, minimization of her needs. And she was really made out to be the bad guy to both his family and her family. And I just really want to thank Tally for being here today. You know, she's alive here to tell her story, so we can't thank her enough for being here to validate everyone out there. So now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Tally, the floor is now yours.
So, I am in my mid to late 20s, and I grew up on the East Coast. And a couple years ago, I decided to move. I was working remotely, and I wanted to move to a pretty location. I moved somewhere where the lake was nearby. I kind of had grown up in a somewhat stressful environment with split parents, two step parents that were pretty combative towards me. My dad was Mormon, so I would go to the church on Sundays, but my mom wasn't Mormon. So I kind of had both worlds. And that definitely played a role in kind of me idealizing this life of like the traditional family. Mother stays at home with the child, dad works, and kind of I just had this dream of creating that ideal family. I would say that as a child growing up, I often felt alone and was constantly walking on eggshells so that I wouldn't upset a step parent. And I definitely was kind of used to managing other people's emotions. In my teen years, I definitely was on the wild side and drank a lot, smoked a lot because I just wanted to escape this feeling of feeling not good enough and neglected and always like I was doing something wrong. I definitely would date older men and kind of look for somebody that could take care of me, but I struggled to really find deep connections and feel loved for who I really was. I moved out when I was 17, worked my way through college, and I knew that I couldn't rely on my parents. And so I became very self sufficient, was definitely like motivated to have the ability to take care of myself financially. And I just knew that I couldn't rely on other people. It wasn't safe to rely on other people. So I get my bachelor's degree. I eventually built a life that I was proud of, though. I was proud of myself. And while I was still kind of developing my confidence and who I was in the world, I had my interests like holistic wellness and personal development and nature, hiking. Like I knew who I was as a person, which made me feel confident in this next phase of my life. I've moved to this new place, made new friends. I am genuinely enjoying life and feel stable in my life, but I'm looking for that next thing. I'm ready for that next phase of my life. Because I had spent like my teen years and early 20s very wildly, drinking a lot, going out a lot with different partners, I felt like I had kind of gotten that out of my system. And so I'm 25, but I'm like, okay, I want to have a partner now and have children while I'm younger instead of doing this same thing and waiting to have children and everything like that. Like I was just ready to get going.
So eventually you do end up meeting the person that this story is about. So tell us about how you met this person, where you met this person in the beginning parts of this relationship.
So when I moved in the new apartment complex that I was going to be living in, it's a very rural town. The lake is like 5 minutes away. It's very small town. And I had just moved into this condo and I saw this handsome man also moving in the same time. He was tall, handsome, drove a nice car. I was like, "Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be nice, like, to have a man like that?" But I just continued about my life. I had obviously seen him there, but we had never interacted. And so were both just kind of living our life. I was working, hiking with friends, and eventually I downloaded Hinge, a dating app, and was swiping through there and matched with him. And I was like, oh, is this my neighbor? And it turns out that it was, but we both pretended like we didn't know we were each other's neighbor, even though we had had like some brief encounters in the parking lot. Like he had asked me, "Oh, is that your dog?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this is my little dog." Um, Very short conversations, but no exchange of name. And so when we matched online, I'm like, okay, he has to know who I am, but he acted like he didn't know who I am, which was kind of this first red flag for me. But I'm like, okay, maybe he's embarrassed that like he knows who I am. I'm not sure. So we go out on our first date. He's like, send me your address. I send my address, and he's like, oh, this is my address. I'm like, oh, how funny. Yeah, we're neighbors. Um, we go out to a yoga class, and I was just so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this could not be more perfect. I was just so happy. He was just my type. He was 11 years older, handsome, successful. And on my first date with him, I realized that we had really similar backgrounds. We both grew up with divorced parents. We both had siblings that were like 10 years younger than us. But we were both these only children that loved to travel, adventure, work on our personal development. And at the time, he had just sold his business. And I felt like, okay, we're both at these phases of our life where we want the next thing. But after that first date, it didn't really go anywhere. I could tell that he wasn't really looking to settle down, even though he would take me out on a couple dates after that. We kind of just remained friends for the next year. He had a boat. We would go out on the boat, go out on the lake. I would bring other friends with me. And it was just kind of like, okay, like I accepted that this wasn't going anywhere, but it was still nice to just be friends and hang out. About a year passes and it's New Year's. He invites me to come out just as friends. And that new year, I've known him for like about a year now, we started hanging out a little bit more regularly and we start getting closer. And he asks me to be his girlfriend about 2 months into kind of hanging out regularly. And I just said no because I could tell that I didn't think he was that serious about it. And I was looking for my person. So I wasn't just going to settle for somebody because he was like bored and I was just next door. But we kept hanging out and he acted like he liked me. And so he asked me again, do you want to be my girlfriend? And I said yes. And so this is July and we are officially exclusive, hanging out almost pretty much every day. And I kind of remained detached because I knew that he had a busy lifestyle with travel, and I just wanted to kind of ease things into it. But he would get mad if I was like talking to other guys or had plans with my friends. He started to control my life in subtle ways, but I almost took it as I was flattered because I was like, oh my gosh, like this man he wants to hang out with me all the time. He wants to like me to be his.
So things have started slowly. You got a full year here of being his friend, seeing him in a specific way, and there's no pressure of any sort of relationship. So people might act normal or just act in the way that they're acting. There's no pressure on you to be something. Relationship begins. These little things are occurring here where you're seeing it as love, but it is control. There's jealousy that is going on. So that is there. We haven't fully discussed his family, but who is he within his family, and how is he formed? And you're seeing a version of him that you like. And what is it that he wants to show the outside world? And who is it that he truly is? Does that make sense?
It's kind of interesting because when I met him, he had been living away from his original family town for the past like 10 years. He's successful and educated, has a master's degree, and he didn't really talk about his family much in the beginning. Like, I think that they came to visit him once or twice, but I felt like, okay, he's pretty removed from his family. He's like in his late 30s, has been living away for a while now, didn't really talk about his family much. So I'm assuming, like, okay, has these cool parents, but isn't really that close to them. I didn't start to raise any concerns about his family until a couple months into dating, where we had gotten into an argument and it got a little escalated. And after that argument, I think he had like went away for a couple days, which was like a common pattern. He would just kind of disappear after an argument. And he came back and we were talking about it and he was like, "Oh, my mom thinks you're crazy." And I'm like, "That's weird because I mean, like, we're just getting to know each other on a deeper level. Like, we haven't really even had that much time together. So that's just interesting." And that was kind of the first red flag that I noticed him kind of going to his parents to complain about me, and they wouldn't come back with anything like productive to say. They would just kind of put me down as well. But I ignored it. I was like, okay, she doesn't really know who I am, so I don't care if she thinks I'm crazy because I know I'm not crazy. And who is she to say that I'm crazy? Um, but it was unfortunate.
But I just want to point out here what he is doing. He can go and talk to his parents about the relationship and discuss it with them. That's his choice. But to come back and then tell you what his parents said, whether it was true or not true, is him triangulating someone else against you to say that it's not just him who has this opinion, this other person has this opinion too. It's a way to try to make you feel, now that you have two people against you, not just one, to make you feel like you have done something wrong. It didn't work on you, but it's still the attempt of doing it.
Yes, there was a lot of triangulation with my family as well, where he would try to go to my mom. This is after he's met them. We've spent Thanksgiving together. And then he would contact my mom and say, like, I don't know how to deal with her. Because I would just try to have a normal conversation about, like, okay, our communication could improve in this way. And there could be no conversations about anything really without it triggering him, which would result in me kind of retracting, not trying to work on the relationship. But he would go to my mom and say, like, she doesn't communicate, all of this stuff, which I felt was very annoying because it was definitely like he was always outsourcing and trying to get outside validation. And even though they would give us tips, it didn't result in any real transformation. Eventually, we also saw some couples therapists. And I felt like those were also like people that he could vent to and triangulate instead of just taking personal responsibility within the relationship.
Hi, everyone. If you've been listening to Narcissist Apocalypse for a long time, you probably know I haven't done host read ads in years. And that's because all I really have with you is trust. So as time has gone on, I become more careful about what I bring to the show, especially because survivors deserve care from people who understand trauma and aren't treating it like some side issue. That's why I wanted to tell you about Rebound Therapy. Rebound offers specialized virtual treatment for people ready to work through past trauma and reclaim their lives. What stood out to me is that their therapists are carefully vetted and trained in evidence based treatment. They pair their clinical expertise with deep support from survivor advocates who have lived experience to support your healing process between sessions. It's covered by many major insurance plans like Aetna, many Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, and more. Head to hellorebound.com/NA to check your insurance or get matched with a therapist. I'll also put the link in the episode description. So there is already triangulation, jealousy, and control, and then the relationship becomes physically abusive. So what happens from here?
So by Thanksgiving, there had been one instance before where he had slapped me across the face a couple of times because we were laying down on his bed and he wanted me to touch him in a certain way that I wasn't doing. And I said, "Oh, that's kind of demanding." And so he got up on the bed and I got up. We're sitting on the bed and he slapped me across the face a couple times and was like, "Snap out of it. Snap out of it." And I'm just like, "What?" Like, I didn't say anything, but I was just kind of super shocked. And I didn't really think much about it. I just kind of went about my day. But I was very hurt by this. And he later on said, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." But we both kind of just rolled it away and continued on with our relationship. A couple weeks later, it's Thanksgiving, and he comes with me to visit my family and spends Thanksgiving with them. And often in the relationship, I felt very unmet emotionally, physically. It was very much like all about him and him trying to start this new business. And he was always stressed and focused on that. And I just kind of was happy to be with him. So I just accepted the way things were. And in early December, I find out that I'm pregnant, and he had just been away on a trip for business. And I pick him up from the airport and he's like, "Are you pregnant?" Because I had told him, I had missed my period. And so we get back to our apartment. We're still living in separate condos at this point. And I go upstairs and take a pregnancy test and realize I'm pregnant. I had showed him the pregnancy test and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And he's like, "Oh my gosh." And we're just kind of sitting in this weird space where it's like, okay, we both want a family and had talked about it before, but like, oh no, now it's here and it's real and it's happening. We're both in a state of shock, but it's almost like a happy shock because this is what we have both been talking about, alluding to. And he goes through my phone because he had been away and he wanted to see what I was up to. And he obviously saw that I had been talking to male friends and stuff. And he starts to get really upset because I had an ex boyfriend that would text me here and there. And he slaps me across the face. This is, 15 minutes after I told him I was pregnant. And then he gets up and leaves my apartment. And I'm just really hurt at this point because I'm so confused. He's saying he wants a family with me and all these things, but he doesn't act like he really values me as a person and who I am.
So you get hit here. It's not the first time you've been hit. You say that you're hurt, but what are you thinking at that point besides the confusion of what's going on? Because it's now the second time that that has occurred. Some people say getting hit is a deal breaker for them, and then sometimes they get hit after they say that's a deal breaker, but it still isn't a deal breaker. So, how are you feeling, not just about the relationship, but about yourself here in this moment? Or do you even think about yourself because now there's a child that is involved?
I'm a very empathetic person. And so I always understand the other person's perspective. And when he slapped me, I felt like, okay, maybe I deserved that because I said something, snappy back. I kind of brushed it away. I didn't realize how serious of an issue it was. And he also used the excuse that, like, oh, I just can't control my temper. Like, I just have this temper and I don't know how to control it and I'm working on it and I don't want to be like that. And so I was just like, okay, I understand where he's coming from that place. And after he slapped me, we were supposed to go to my family's house for the weekend. And I texted my dad, like, no, he's not coming with me anymore. And my dad said, why? And I'm like, oh, because he's a hitter. Because, hours before he had slapped me across the face. And I knew that it wasn't okay, and I was telling him, like, "Okay, this is not okay, like, I'm not doing this with you." And so he wasn't gonna go with me to my family's house, but of course, we talk about it and end up kind of mending to some degree, and so we hop in the car and go to my dad's house. But I had already told him that, he hit me, and so we arrive at my dad's house, and my dad has a conversation with him and tells him, "You cannot hit her, or the police will get called, like, this is serious." And after the conversation that he had with my dad, he gets back in the car with me and he's like, okay, that's what I needed to hear, like, to not be able to do that again. I needed that conversation. It was good. Like, I'm not going to do that again. It's never going to happen again. And a couple months go by and I'm just kind of in this place where I'm like, do I trust this person and go all in with this person, or do I get an abortion and just like be done? Because I'm a pretty logical person. And if we're not going to be together, I don't want to have a kid right now. I don't want to be a single mom. And I told him that multiple times, like, I'll go get an abortion. No biggie. Like, if this is not working, no problem. And he's like, no, I want to be a dad. I want to be the best dad. All of these things that kind of created an illusion in my mind.
So, we have these things that he's saying where it's kind of like, I want to be this better version that wasn't my family. It's his own future faking on himself that you're believing this version of him that he wants to be, even though he isn't that thing, but he's constantly saying he wants to be this thing. So that's a big part of what you're dealing with. And it's a cognitive dissonance of what you're dealing with right there. That's one thing. But something we haven't mentioned yet is that he's religious. So, can you talk about his religion and how he uses it to make himself feel better? Is that the best way to kind of explain it a little before you kind of take it a little bit further?
100%. The false identity and identity that he portrayed is so interesting to me because literally on his Instagram bio, he has WWJD, which is what would Jesus do? And I'm just like looking at that, like, did Jesus beat his girlfriend? Like, does Jesus, abandon his family and not contribute financially? And so it was like, says he's religious and he acts like this Jesus follower, but behind closed doors, it's very far from that. There's no love, there's no compassion or empathy at all. It's all about control and portraying an image that is very different than the reality. And I totally think that he uses passages in the Bible and this idea of repentance and forgiveness to cleanse his own mental state. Like, okay, yeah, I did this and it was horrible and I shouldn't have done that, but it's okay because I'll be forgiven and I can, repent and wash away my sins and everything will be okay. So on Sundays, we look for church. And I grew up Mormon, but I wasn't really that Mormon practicing. And he had gone to different churches, like the Methodist church with his dad when he was younger. So we would just go to different churches in the area of where we were living, as well as like this spiritual center, which was something I liked about him because it's like, okay, he had this religious side, but he also had this like more spiritual side. So I was like, okay, perfect. Best of both worlds, just like me. Those are, I dabble in both. And so we'd go to church and I'm pregnant at this point. There had been a couple more instances of like the physical abuse. And he told me that he confessed to one of the pastors that he had hit me. And he knew that it wasn't right. And he wanted to talk to this pastor and kind of get help. It was always him looking for help for this behavior that he couldn't control. We had also at this point started seeing a couples therapist that was a pastor, and he had this book for us to go through. And we do this for a couple weeks, and then he just decides that he doesn't want to do that anymore. And because there had been another physical incident where I saw on social media that he was kind of flirting with this girl. And so I had texted him from my apartment, like, oh, if you're going to be doing that, like, take the pictures that you have of me off of your page because it just makes me look dumb. And he's in his apartment and he comes over, stomps over, and he's banging on my door. And I'm like, I don't want to talk right now. I'm blow drying my hair. And he starts kicking the door. And I just ignore him and he starts really kicking the door to the point where I think it's going to come down. So I just open the door. He grabs my blow dryer, throws it on the floor, and it's like, what the F are you saying? You're so immature, all this stuff. And about 2 minutes later, the police show up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what? That was fast. They come in and start interviewing me, talking to me, like, did he do anything to you? I'm like, no, he was just upset. He wanted to come inside. So I let him inside. And then he's talking to the male officer and is like, I know I have this anger problem. I need help. And I'm like, he didn't hit me. And I'm a very honest person. Like, there was nothing happened, no arrest necessary. Yeah, he was kicking down my door. But again, it's me kind of rationalizing his behavior. I'm like, oh, he was upset. I wasn't letting him in. Of course, he's banging down the door. And after this incident, he tells me, I'm going to an anger management training. I'll be back next week. So he literally flies away. We don't have a conversation about repairing this. I'm just kind of left, and he's going to go work on his problem, supposedly. And I find out later that it was just kind of this life coaching seminar that his dad had told him about. And his dad had told him he should do this. And he comes back and he tells me, like, okay, I had a lot of realizations. I just feel like nobody can really love me for who I am. And I'm going to work on this problem. I think something that was just so difficult for me to understand was there were moments where everything was good. And then he had these anger outbursts. And I'm like, okay, this is just a person that struggles with his anger. I didn't see the depths of who he really was until later on. But we stopped seeing the pastor couples therapist because he just decides that he doesn't want to do that anymore. And we just continue. We keep moving forward. I'm engaged at this point, and I'm like still holding on to this false idea that we can somehow mend these small problems and create a life together. So I'm engaged, I'm pregnant, and we go visit his family. And there's another physical instance where I'm like getting my suitcase ready to go. He's still sleeping in the same room, and he tells me to get out of the room because he's trying to sleep. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to, quietly do this. And that upset him. So He grabbed my suitcase and threw it across the room, and it ends up like running into a nightstand. And his mom is, it's her house and she's outside and she hears that and she's like, "Oh, is everything okay?" It really wasn't, because he had got up and splashed water in my face, had like poured water in my shoe, all because he was upset because I was packing up my suitcase and he was trying to sleep. And so his mom comes in the room later. He goes to the bathroom and I tell her, like, "Are you aware that he's a hitter?" And she says, "Well, we all have to look at ourselves, but I'm here for you guys. I think you guys just need to learn how to communicate." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I understand, but it would be helpful if you tell him that he has a problem and needs to get help for this problem." And she's just like, "Well, you know, you shouldn't be thinking negatively. If you guys want to be together, you guys just need to work it out together." So I left visiting his family really uncomfortable, because now I see that his mother protects him in a way that's really weird. And he's going to her and complaining to her about me, but there's no real growth in our relationship and his anger problem. So I'm getting really confused and concerned because I'm about to have a baby. But again, he tells me, like, everything's going to be okay. We're going to be a family. He's going to buy a house in a new city. We're going to move there. All of these illusions. Meanwhile, he's working on his new business a lot. He is stressed with that and using that stress as an excuse to outlash on me. And I'm just at this point, like, trying to stay as calm and level headed as I can, because I'm pregnant and having a child with him. So from here, we eventually get back to our little lake town and we decide to move in together. So we find this place and we kind of split the rent in a way where he's paying the majority of it, but I am paying some of it as well. The move is obviously stressful, which causes him to be really angry. And I'm just a very kind of passive, easygoing person, and I want to make sure other people are always happy. So I'm helping him as much as I can, organizing all his clothes, trying to be this perfect wife, even though we're not married yet, but we're talking about it.
So I'm hearing that you've started organizing yourself around his needs and his stress. At this point, are you still trying to get your own needs met?
We would have conversations about like what wasn't working in the relationship. And he would say, like, "Okay, just write down or tell me exactly what you need." And then I would write it down and tell him exactly what I needed, like affection or like kind words, things like that. And then he would do it once and then not do it anymore because he was like focused on his business and too busy and stressed with that. And how could I be so demanding? And like, why did I need affection and love from him? He's busy, like he is creating this business, and that's where all of his focus and attention was on. And he acted like he wanted to please me, but not sustainable for him. So I would adapt my needs. So I would just like become really reclused and cater to him, making sure that his environment was clean and he was fed so that he wouldn't be stressed and be able to work on whatever he needed to work on.
So the two of you move in together and then you go to Bali for a honeymoon of sorts, a baby moon. So what happens on that trip?
On the trip, it's like we're in this beautiful place, but of course, there's these underlying feelings of we're not really connected. He's focused on his business and I'm just kind of there. There's no physical intimacy at this point, which he gets mad at me for not initiating. But I'm like, "Well, I don't even feel connected to you. And I'm not going to initiate with you if you're like all upset and stuff." And so we're still having the same underlying issues. He slaps me on this trip as well. And he made comments on this trip that kind of showed me he didn't really care about me. He's like, "Well, we're having a kid together, so it just doesn't matter. We'll figure it out." And I'm like, "Oh, he doesn't care about our relationship at this point." We get back home, and there's more physical abuse, but it starts getting a little bit different. we're going to bed one night and he starts hitting me with pillows. And I'm like, stop. I'm telling him to stop. And so he keeps doing it. And I raise my voice a little bit and tell him to stop. And he gets on top of me in a way around my bump, but pins me down and covers my mouth and my nose. And I can't breathe. And so I'm like trying to wiggle out of it. And I eventually do. And I run upstairs to the bathroom. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so freaky. And he comes upstairs and he's like, "Are you calling the police?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm just like taking a moment." And he's like, "Let's just go to bed." So again, I kind of just push it away. I'm like, "Okay, let's just go to bed." He was angry, I guess.
So when he does something like that, and then you go to sleep right after, does the next day does he wake up as if nothing happened? Or like how does he feel about himself after? Does he still see himself as a good person? And at the same time, that's a pretty scary thing that occurred. So what's going through your head at the same time?
I just got used to kind of this cycle of him having an anger outburst, saying, "I'm sorry, I was angry, I'm stressed about this and that." And I'd just be like, "Okay, I get it." And we'd continue on. And there was definitely like multiple times throughout the relationship where he would put me down. I'm 11 years younger. I'm kind of into some woo woo stuff. And he didn't like that. And it would make him angry. He would tell me I couldn't watch certain things on YouTube, or I was stupid for being interested in that. And those were all things that I just kind of pushed aside because I'm like, anybody that is putting another person down, was obviously struggling with their own things. So even though it was hurtful to me, I kind of brushed it aside and I didn't see the whole situation of this being an abusive relationship because I was so focused on the potential of the future that we allegedly were going to build together. So from that instance where he had kind of covered my mouth and nose and I was trying to get out of it, he had left a scratch on my face. And I'm many hours away from my mom, so we would FaceTime here and there. And we're FaceTiming, and she's like, "Oh, what happened to your nose?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just burned it with a curling iron." I'm not going to reveal what really happened. But the 4th of July is a couple weeks later, and I eventually confess. I'm like, "Oh, that scratch on my face was from him." So we spend the 4th of July with my family, and he has a boat, so he takes us all out. We're all having a good time. And then before my parents leave, my mom has a conversation with him and tells him the domestic violence needs to stop. And I was really nervous about her having a conversation with him because I knew it was going to trigger him. And I wanted to just kind of keep the peace at all costs. So she has a conversation with him. And I tell him afterwards, like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that she had a conversation with you about this." And the next day, he has planned to go on a surf trip with his friends. And I'm like, "Sure, go. Like, we're about to have a baby. This is going to be like your last trip in a while. So go for it. Go have fun." And before he goes, the night before, I had told him that I didn't want to accept the bare minimum anymore. We're living together and there's no real relationship. I do the cooking for him. We go out to the grocery store sometimes, but there's no real intimacy and appreciation of one another. And we just go to bed. But in the morning, he wakes up and says, "You can't be saying this shit to me. You can't say that shit to me," and starts hitting me with the pillows. But because he was leaving that day, I just kind of sat there and we had actually had a counseling call that same morning. And I'm telling the therapist he did it again. And he confesses, like, "Yeah, I did this to her. I hit her again and I have an anger problem." But this day he called his dad after he was hitting me with the pillows. And his dad tells him that he needs to get away from me, that we should just break up. So on the counseling call, he's like, I'm done. She can just move and mess up the kid, and I'll go move over here and live my life. Like, I don't care. And so he leaves, and I'm just kind of left there, like, what do I do? And I was on a walk with one of my dear friends, and she's like, you should go to the police. And I'm like, oh no, like, I can't do that. It's not that bad. Nothing really happened. But while he's away, I'm driving and I just have this strong feeling that I should just go to the police. So I drive over to the station and I make the report. I tell them everything that happened and explain the incident where he had put his hand over my mouth and nose. And then a couple weeks later, where he's hitting me again. And I was telling them this, but I just wanted to make a report of it. I didn't want, there to be any action taken. And I thought that I could just go there and make the report. Eventually, he comes back from his surf trip. And I told him, hey, I reported this to the police just so that there's a record of it, but it's not going to happen again, right? And he's like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen again. And he goes in to make a statement to the cops because they wanted to get his side. And he confesses, like, yeah, I was hitting her. Yeah, I covered her mouth because she was screaming. And they end up arresting him. And I just feel so guilty. I'm like, what did I do? Because we had been good for a couple days. He's back from his trip. We're in that honeymoon, riding that honeymoon wave again. And then this happens, and I'm like, crap, I messed everything up. He's going to be so mad at me. And I get a call from his dad saying, he's in jail. I'm so mad at you. Why did you do that? And I was like, well, I was scared. And he's like, really? You were really scared of him? And tells me, you need to stay away from my son, all this stuff. And I'm just like, what? I'm about to have a child with this man. We're engaged. Like, how am I going to stay away from him? I didn't understand how they would try to break this up. And he's in jail, he gets released, and there's a no contact order in place, so we can't communicate. But he's able to communicate with my mom, and he has a conversation with her and is like, "Oh, this was horrible. It's never going to happen again. Like, I want to be a family. I want to do all this stuff." So I get the no contact order removed and we move back in together, and then it's like kind of pretty much prep time to have a baby. I'm a couple weeks out from having a baby, and we're just kind of in that zone, setting up the bassinet and the rocking chair and all that stuff, which was kind of like a way for us to ignore our problems and continue on this illusion of a life that we are about to create.
So after the arrest, the two of you returned to preparing for the baby. So what was that period like as the birth got closer?
For my baby shower, this is for me to celebrate the life that I'm bringing into this world, and in a way to kind of take away from that and become the spotlight. He had to make a drama and act like the victim for some reason to kind of bring the focus off of me back onto him. Like, oh, he's going through starting this new business and it's all about him and what he's creating, which I understand he wanted like some recognition as well, but there's a time and a place for that. And it just had to be when it was supposed to be for me and this new baby that I was bringing into this world. And I end up having my birth. It was natural and great. And about a couple days later, he has another angry outburst because he goes through my phone and sees that I was talking to my friend. And I had posted a picture of me just giving birth in the hospital bed with some sunglasses on. And he's like, you look like a bitch in that picture. But my friend had sent me a message like, "Oh, I love that picture." Said, "Oh, thank you so much." Like he didn't like it. So thank you. And she responded like, "Oh, it's because your light is shining too bright and he just can't handle it." And he sees this and just destroys my phone, smashes it into a million pieces, and is like, if you have a problem with me, you need to tell me. And I'm like, well, I can't tell you because you get super upset. And I was just really sad at this point because it's heartbreaking that he didn't value me the way that I wanted to be valued. And I was constantly trying to prove myself and kind of maintain a healthy relationship, but it just wasn't working. And then he destroyed my phone and again had a trip the next day. So he's like, oh, go get a new phone. And I'm with a newborn baby. I have to drive 40 minutes to the nearest town and get a new phone, which he reimbursed me for. But he's away again and then comes back and everything's good. His mom comes into town to visit. And I find out afterwards that he was texting my mom and telling her to come visit as well while his mom was going to be there because he was like, she's going to be mean to me. She's so mean to me. And I started realizing that he was creating this narrative where I was the bad guy. And I just couldn't understand. I'm like, me having needs, that makes me the bad guy. Me wanting accountability, that makes me the bad guy. I didn't really understand, but his mom visited and it was a semi fine trip. I'm just a couple days postpartum and we're managing that. And I'm pretty much just doing that and focusing my energy on that. But I could tell that the cycle, we were getting to a point where there was gonna be another explosion. Because distance would grow between us, he would get quiet, really like into his work, on his phone a lot. It's like he was dissociating in a way. So I would try to remove myself or get quiet or get really passive. But that also was a trigger for him. It was like I was damned if I said something and damned if I didn't say anything. And so I tell him, because he drops his mom off at the airport, and I tell him, like, oh, I'm going to go stay at my mom's house for a couple days. And he got upset because I didn't invite him, but I didn't want to invite him because I knew that we needed some space because I'm getting into this position where I'm feeling like I'm walking on eggshells and he's really stressed and I'm just kind of want to get away from that. So of course we have a conversation and I'm like, okay, just come. And then we get in the car, we're driving, and he kind of wants to argue and I'm just like, hey, like let's talk about this later. And he's like, okay, well then you drive. And I'm like, well, I might need to check on the baby. He's like, "Well, I can check on the baby." And I'm like, "Okay, why did you even come? Like, I just wanted some space from all of this." And so I'm like, "Okay, you should just go back home. Like, you should pull off here and take an Uber back to the house." And he's like, "No, you're going to drive me back." And we have already driven like a couple of hours at this point. So we drive. He's driving himself back. I'm in the passenger seat. And I tell him, like, "You're so selfish." Because I'm like, we've just driven a couple hours. You're going to make us drive all the way back. And we've got our newborn in the back seat. And he threatens to slap me in the face. And I'm just like, you're such a loser. And he backhands me while he's in the driver's seat multiple times. My face instantly swells. And I just sit there. And the whole rest of the drive, he's just like, F, F, F. I messed up. I messed up. I messed up. I'm so sorry. I messed up for like 30 minutes. And we just got to our home and I tell him to get out of my car and he's like, I'm never going to see you again. And I'm like, yeah, just get out of my car. So he gets out and he gets into his car and I don't hear from him. So, of course, I follow up a couple hours later. I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know, like I'm having an anxiety attack and I'm going to go to Florida. I'm flying to Florida. I'm going to the airport and flying. I'm flying to visit my family. And I'm like, no, come back. Like, we just had a baby. Why are you leaving? I don't understand. Again, I'm just kind of rationalizing that he hit me and it doesn't matter. Like, what's more important is that we have a baby and we're going to be a family and make it work. So, why are you running away? And for the next couple weeks, he's just like, no, I'm not coming back. And I'm like, okay, well, then we need to figure out what we're going to do. Like, I need to move somewhere else and we need to establish like some child support. And he just ignores me. But I'm like telling him that I'm going to move out. And he's like, no, you can just stay there, basically by yourself and this newborn baby. And I called his mom and I told her that I was really hurt that she hadn't reached out to me. I had just given birth and it's like I didn't exist. And she said, well, you were mean to him. She excused him giving me a black eye by saying that I was mean to him for reporting him to the police and telling him that he was a selfish loser. And now it's clicking for me. This is done. This is done. When I realized that he left and there wasn't like an ounce of any remorse or any empathy, the whole family doesn't have empathy or integrity in any degree and not even regard for human life. I was like, oh, this is the type of person I'm dealing with. And now I'm really concerned because I saw it for what it was. So I took legal action, and that became a whole other battle that was really difficult because you're facing this person. They know what they've done, and they're presenting to a court that they're this completely other different person. And he had his attorney there, like trying to drill me. And I was like, oh, this is horrible. And now I have a baby with this person and I'm going to have to deal with this for essentially the rest of my life. Like, I just started to get so discouraged and heartbroken. But I had reached out to one of his prior girlfriends and talked to her via message. And I was like, hey, I was just with this person. I'm wondering, like, if you had any instances of physical abuse or anything like that. And she was such an angel and told me about their relationship and how it was emotionally abusive and physically abusive. And she just really held me strong and told me that I would get through this. And it's not because of me. This is just a person that he is. And I was so grateful to know that I wasn't the cause of all of this horribleness in the relationship. And we started connecting with more of his prior ex girlfriends, and they all had similar things to say. There were some women that were completely terrified of him because of what he had done to them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, completely terrified at this point because I'm like, I feel like I'm in that show, like, who the bleep did I marry? Because I really had no idea that he was really this horrible person. He had really portrayed himself in the beginning of the relationship to be this, successful, good guy that wanted a family. Little did I know his past of abusing women. And now I have a child with this person, and I'm afraid for my child and what he could do for her. And it feels like a death sentence where I have to deal with this person. All these other girls, they got away. And I just wasn't smart enough because I had held on to that fantasy that we could make it work. And I thought that he wanted that. And when I realized that he didn't, and I realized who he really was, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to have to learn some skills now. So my healing journey began, and I started reading a lot of books and a lot of therapy and a lot of just feeling the grief of this is not what it's going to be. It's the death of a dream. This dream I had of creating a family with this person is gone. Like, it's a completely different situation now. And now I need to protect myself and my child. So I just got to the point where I realized that the best way for me to handle the situation is obviously to protect myself legally, but emotionally, I have to build myself up to a point where this person cannot hurt me. And it wasn't helpful to me to blame him and, say what a horrible person he is. What helped me more so was just realizing that this person is, sick. unfortunately. And I just had to have compassion for him. And I'm like, I feel bad for him that he has so much anger and disease in his mind that he feels the need to treat others this way. And so just choosing to always show up with grace and kindness while maintaining boundaries, because I'm not going to let him hurt me or my child ever again. So we get onto the Our Family Wizard app. And of course, he's harassing me through there and he wants to see the child. And I say it has to be professionally supervised. And he just fights that and fights that. But I maintained that boundary. And it's been a learning process of just standing my ground and not letting him snap his fingers and me adjust to whatever he wants. But I have to just stay strong, stay grounded, but also stay kind and not let this person think that they have control over me. So it's been quite the journey. And there's been many moments where I'm like, why did this happen to me? But I realized that it was for my greater evolution and just to become a more strong, empowered individual that has more self respect, more integrity, and is really clear on what I really do want for my life.
And if you have any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
I found this book at a thrift store. It's called But He'll Change: End the Thinking That Keeps You in an Abusive Relationship by Joanna V. Hunter. This book perfectly captured the trap and the mental illusions that I would tell myself. And reading books like that and just empowering myself and becoming the best version of myself is what has really helped me overcome this situation, because I used to think that being patient and being, using positive thinking would transform this relationship. And it didn't, because some things are just not meant to be. And I thank God every single day that this man left, because some people stay in these relationships for decades. And luckily, I was just in it for a short period of time and I safely got out of it, because it could have been so much worse. And I think just knowing who you are is a way to not let other people manipulate you and put you down. But I trust that it wasn't meant to be, and I accept that. And it's unfortunate because there's really like no winning or having like a normal co-parenting relationship with these kinds of people, because they'll always find a way to make conflict. But it's really a surrender. And the more I build myself up, I'm like, I don't care what he's doing with his life. He wants to post pictures on social media of the baby that he has to see in a supervised professional setting for a couple hours at a time. But he's still portraying this like baby dad, and, that he's this best father. And I'm like, I just watch it and I'm like, that is so interesting to me. Like, I'm not even upset about it anymore. It's so interesting because I know now that love cannot transform someone who doesn't want to transform themselves. And even though he was telling me that he wanted to change, he didn't really. He was a very calculated person, I realized afterwards. And so he knew exactly what he was doing. And we have to trust behavior over potential and walk away from people that have the inability to really connect with us on a heart level and meet us with kindness and love and integrity, and just, you know, become the best version of ourselves, because that's the worst thing for them, is to see us thrive without them.
Well, Tally, I really want to thank you for being here with us today, sharing your story and everything that you dealt with. I know everyone here is happy that you're out safe, because with someone like him, you have no idea where it can go. It can lead to you not being here to tell your story. And we're just happy that you're safe, your child is safe, and that you're doing well in the aftermath. So just a big thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I know that so many people are struggling in these relationships, and it's heartbreaking. But as we continue to rise ourselves up, we will get through this.
Well, thank you once again, Tally, for being our guest today. And if you want to be a guest like Tally was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, fill out our guest form, press the submit button, and we'll go from there. We also have a support group at our website. At our support group, we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on as well to get validation from survivors just like you. Join our support group today if you need support. And we also have a newsletter at our website where you get a free workbook for every new survivor story that comes out. So that is also at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for today's survivor story, today's episode. So for myself and Tally, we hope you have a good night.